The Mandalorian Chapter 23 has hinted at spies being present in the hero's camp, and everyone's been speculating on who they are. Strap yourselves in, guys, because it seems there's one clear answer here.
Thank you for gathering the Mandalorians into one place.
One that could plague Bo-Katan for years to come.
This weapon means nothing to me or my people.
We'll start by looking at the suspects, the case for and against each of them, which will lead us to who the spies are most likely to be. To kick things off, let's look at what we know so far. We know the Mandalorians are now together. They're aiming to retake Mandalore, they've landed on the planet, and Bo leads the combined forces of the Night Owls and the Children of the Watch. And they've also met with these pirate scavenger-like Mandos on the surface of Mandalore, who have supposedly survived there for a number of years, ever since the Purge. Now, the spies, it's safe to say, are already in the group, and we get that clue from Moff Gideon himself. He knew the Mandalorians were going to try and retake the planet, as seen in episode 7 when he has a meeting with the Shadow Council. Now, there could be a spy inside the Children of the Watch, as they were the first to announce the plan way back in episode 5 when the armor was on Navarro and announced it to the others. Or they could also be hidden within the Night Owls, who learnt of the plan the following episode in episode 6 when Bo-Katan turned up in an attempt to retake her fleet. Or perhaps it could actually be both, or they could be outsiders from both groups. Now, there is a possibility of it being background Mandalorians in the background that don't actually say anything, but they're just kind of there. However, I don't think there's enough substance for them to go down this route this season. I don't think John or Dave would go down that path at this stage. However, what I do want to get into right now is one of the most popular theories, and that is that it's the Armourer, a staple of the old way. She's very much the leader of the Children of the Watch, and she's the one responsible for their survival over the years. And she also came up with the idea of retaking Mandalore. Could there be more to her than meets the eye? Up until episode 7, we've seen a lot of development for the character of the Armourer this season. She's had an increased role in season 1, season 2, and could it be for the reason of this big reveal at the end that she was a spy the whole time, that she's always been partnered with Gideon or had a connection with Gideon? There are a few questionable moments this time around. Initially, she seemingly dismissed Bo's mythosaur reveal. She just replied saying, "This is the way." Kind of made me feel like she suspected Bo was a bit of a fruitcake. Only for her to then pretty much immediately go back on what she said in a way where she came across as making Bo sound a little bit crazy. She then came out and believed her wholeheartedly, even to the extent that she would now abandon the strict beliefs all of a sudden that she's held for many, many years, and that is the beliefs of Mandalorians wearing their helmets. And let's not forget here that she told Din Djarin in the Book of Boba Fett that he was no longer a Mandalorian because he removed his helmet. So now someone tell her that they saw a mythosaur, and now that whole belief's out the window does smell a bit fishy. And she then goes on to tell Bo-Katan to remove her helmet, telling her that she walks both worlds. She spent time with both tribes, the Children of the Watch and the more modern Mandalorians that don't hold the strict beliefs that they do, and she can be the one to unite all Mandalores together. And now this is actually what Moff Gideon's plan was. He wanted all the Mandalorians together so he can crush them all at the same time. Now, I want to point out something here that just struck me. Did the Armourer tell Bo-Katan to remove her helmet, so in her point of view she's no longer a Mandalorian to her? That way she's not betraying her own people by setting them up against Gideon. I don't think Gideon actually wants to kill all the Mandalorians after all, only the ones that won't follow him. I think if there was Mandalorians out there that would follow Gideon and would accept him being their ruler, then I think he would let them join him. Hence why he told Bo-Katan to tell the other Mandalorians that she was with in episode 7 that the planet now belongs to him. And when that didn't go to plan, and only after does he announce for his troopers to open fire and kill them. But talking about Gideon as we're on that subject, there could also be a history between him and the Armourer. They do have similar style helmets, both sporting the horns, which indicates that they both could have a history or at least admire Darth Maul from his time ruling Mandalore. Did you notice how the Armourer split just before they were trapped, returning to the fleet with 6 survivors needing medical attention? A point was made here to show us, the audience, the ship leaving Mandalore's atmosphere and reaching the fleet and actually communicating with them. There's likely a reason that it showed us this part, because it didn't really fit in with the direction the story was going at that given time, and I think we'll come on to that in a moment because there's more to this than meets the eye. Now, the Armourer, I would say, is the one main candidate from the Children of the Watch who could be a spy, if any of them, but the same can't be said for Bo's old forces, the Night Owls. Now, we know they're very much mercenaries for hire, and they're bouncing between jobs at this point in time in the galaxy. Woves was their leader. He's probably not very happy. He's been pegged down a rank or two, and we don't know if Gideon got to them beforehand and hired them for a job, potentially for payment, for Beskar, or even for some kind of promise for a future of Mandalore with them involved alongside Gideon. Now, do you notice here how woves was also the first to split once they were trapped? He went off to warn the fleet whilst the others were fighting for their lives. We've looked at the two groups, but there's also outsiders that are aware of this plan as well. The Mando survivors they met on the planet's surface. So you're telling me they survived all these years on scraps on the surface of Mandalore when everyone else was long gone? The planet was largely uninhabitable. Even if that is the case, did these survivors not notice Gideon's arrival, the Imperial ships entering and exiting the atmosphere over time? Did they not hear the construction of the Imperial base around the Great Forge underground, likely just below where they've travelled past many times? They knew where the forge was located. They must have been aware of an Imperial presence there. I mean, they saw Bo-Katan arrive quickly enough when she entered Mandalore's atmosphere and landed, and they began their journey through Mandalore. They picked up on her pretty quickly and went to investigate. Now, it is likely that Gideon suspected the arrival of Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorians and then pre-warned these surviving Mandos. Or perhaps they're not even Mandalorians at all. Perhaps they're simply given scavenged armor to wear and play the part. Maybe they're just Imperials. Another question we need to ask about these surviving Mandos. They survive on this hostile planet for years, and suddenly a large proportion of them are sick and need transporting to the fleet. Why are they suddenly sick now? If they're the spies, then what they've actually done is infiltrated both halves of the group, the fleet above the atmosphere and the landing party down below. But last of not least, we need to talk about another outsider, and this one isn't widely spoke about, but is still a suspect to some people, and I can understand why, and that would be Greef Karga. Now, he does know of their plans to return to Mandalore, and he probably likely waved them off when they left Navarro, and he also has a history of taking money from the Empire. Now, there is a compelling case for all the parties I've mentioned today, and I think it was actually written this way on purpose. You could also look back into Season 2 for clues Gideon does have someone on the inside hidden away. Now, some appear much more guilty than others at this point. Greef Karga, for example, I'd like to eliminate him straight away from the picture. I believe he's genuine. Although he did host both forces in the same location on Navarro for a time, he wasn't aware of the Night Owls or the rest of the Children of the Watch actually settling there until after it happened in a way. He only offered that land to Din Djarin, his friend, who he's already risked his life for at this point in time. Now let's go back to that glaring point they made to us in episode 7 when they focused on the ship leaving atmosphere with the survivors and the armor on board to reach the fleet. Now, if we take them into account, they actually have two suspects on board, the survivors and the armorer. And what this tells me is that at least one of them is guilty. I mean, why would they bother showing that scene otherwise? It very much went against the grain of the episode and the way the story was progressing. It's important to take into account the title is plural. It says spies, it doesn't say spy, not a singular individual. That's how I take it. Whilst this can be spun many different ways, I think it's done to mislead. Typically, when you read Spies, you would look at a group of individuals working together, let's say the Armourer, woves, and maybe another. Or you'd look at the Survivors, a new group that was introduced into episode 7, where they met on Mandalore, and we don't really know much about them. And their story also smells a little bit fishy. Now, if this group of Mandalorians were on Gideon's side, then they would instantly be classed as spies. They wouldn't need any other parties involved. There's a number of them after all. Now, online, many people's first reactions were either one or the other. Either it was going to be a group of people, some people only thought it was going to be the Armourer, or it was going to be this group of Mandalorians. I didn't see anyone suspect it to be the spies and someone else on the first viewing. However, let me know in the comments if you was one of them that did. Now, I'm going to rule out a heavy favourite right now, and that is the Armourer. I'm going to put some of the blame onto the survivors, but I don't think they're acting alone, and we'll get onto that. But I'm ruling out the Armourer because of her actions up until this point. You see, I've been watching back episodes from previous seasons of The Mandalorian to refresh my memory, and taking into account what we've seen this season, I think she's 100% Mandalorian here. Ever since we were introduced to her in Season 1, all she's ever really done is look out for others. She's very selfless, she's always aimed to preserve the Mandalorian way, very much defending rather than attacking, which does actually go against a typical Mandalorian way of being, which is to be a warrior, and that shows that she can adapt. And this is evidenced when all the Mandalorians went into hiding to hide their numbers instead of rising up and fighting against the Empire at any given opportunity. Yes, they would have taken down many Imperial opponents, but how many Mandalorian lives would have been lost in the process? I mean, considering how few of them are left in the galaxy at this point, it's not really a chance the Armourer was willing to take. The Armourer's big moment this season of her accepting Bo-Katan not wearing a helmet and opening up to the idea of other Mandalorians joining their covert to rebuild and retake Mandalore is one of showing her character development, a departure from the old ways that separated them in the first place, giving way for a new way of being to take stage and a chance for Mandalore to be reborn yet again. Her helmet may signal past ties with Maul, however that doesn't mean she still acts in that way. Characters can change over time, as we've seen with Bo-Katan as well. Really what this boils down to for the armourer is the right puzzle pieces have come into place at a time when the audience is looking for a guilty party. We're very much looking for someone to blame, and the armourer has been involved in big things recently, which automatically puts her into the picture. Now for me, I do think the survivors are guilty. I just think it's completely unlikely a good number are suddenly sick when all the years leading up to this moment on Mandalore they've survived just fine, and now they've infiltrated both halves of the group. Now the title could include Elia Kane. Now we do know that she's a spy already, and she's had a part to play from the New Republic standpoint in being an inside person there, but also I'm going to say Axe Woves as well. Now for reasons mentioned before, he's for hire. The Night Owls are pretty much for hire. He has no love for Bo-Katan and he doesn't feel she's a worthy leader. He takes pride, but on top of that his pride has also taken a beating as well, and he split early from the group once they were trapped. Is he really going to use his jetpack to reach the fleet, which is just above atmosphere at this point in time? Very doubtful. Also with Spies, they typically try to blend in to not draw attention. Now he does have notable issues with Paz Vizsla in episode 7, and that is probably suspected by many of the Mandalorians. Bo-Katan suspected there would be teething troubles herself. Now, if Axe Woves didn't play up to the part here and he kept a low profile, wouldn't things be a little too good to be true? Isn't it much more like his character to then play up to the role of Axe Woves and confront Paz Vizsla and cause a bit of conflict? That way, not suspecting that things are just a little too quiet between the two different camps. Now to summarise here, I strongly believe the Spies are definitely the survivors. 100% that is my theory for it, but also Elia Kane plays into that title as well, and I think likely Axe Woves too. Now, if the Spies do come from Mando heritage, that certainly spells huge trouble for Bo-Katan going forwards. How many more disloyal Mandalorians will appear in the future as she tries to usher in a new age for Mandalore? Could there be another civil war on the horizon for him? Let me know in the comments who you think the Spies are. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Leave a like if you enjoyed today's video. I'll catch you in the next one. This is the way.